The alien starship floated silently above the barren surface of the outer colony. Its sleek metallic body shimmered under the light of two suns, reflecting golden sparks onto the cracked ground below. From far away, the colony looked tiny, almost fragile, a small cluster of buildings and vehicles spread across a dusty plain. Yet, even from above, the energy that radiated from the human settlements seemed different. It was subtle, almost invisible, but there was something in it that made the alien soldiers uneasy. Inside the starship, the alien queen stood on the observation deck, tall and regal, her translucent skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Her long, graceful limbs moved with the elegance of someone who had ruled thousands of worlds. Her eyes, deep pools of emerald energy, scanned the colony beneath. Centuries of power and conquest had taught her that fear and control were the true marks of strength. And yet, somehow, she felt a small ripple of uncertainty. "Are the humans dangerous?" asked one of her advisors, a multi-limbed creature with eyes that shimmered like molten silver. "They are weak," the queen replied, her voice calm but laced with authority. "No human could threaten this empire, but there is something in their eyes." She paused, leaning forward slightly, feeling the faint pulse of energy that radiated from the surface below. "I will observe." That is all. The doors to the deck hissed open, and the human appeared. Not a fleet, not a squad, just one man. He walked calmly, without weapons, without armor, and yet each step carried a quiet confidence that made even the queen's seasoned guards tense. His brown eyes were steady, unflinching, meeting the gaze of the most powerful being in the room without fear. The queen tilted her head. Humans were small, fragile, and unpredictable. Most were afraid of her and her soldiers. This one did not seem afraid at all. His posture was straight, his shoulders broad, and his expression calm. Yet beneath that calmness, there was a presence, something almost tangible. A force that made the hairs on the guard's arms stand on end. "I have come to speak with the queen," the human said, his voice clear and strong. There was no pleading, no begging. Just words full of purpose. "Who are you to address me?" the queen asked, her voice echoing through the chamber like a low thunderclap. Her energy flared slightly, a warning, but the human did not flinch. He took another step forward. "I am not here to fight," he replied. "I am here to warn you." The queen raised an elegant eyebrow. "Warn me? Against what?" "Against me?" Her voice carried disbelief. She had ruled countless worlds. She had destroyed armies without lifting a hand. What could a single human possibly warn her about? The human paused, his eyes drifting to the horizon, as if measuring the distance between himself and the queen's power. Then, with a calm voice filled with conviction, he said, "Against your empire. Against your choice to rule with fear. Against the path you have taken." For a moment, the chamber fell silent. The queen's guards exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to strike or stay still. The energy in the room shifted, subtle but undeniable. The air seemed heavier, charged. The human stood there, ordinary in appearance, yet radiating something extraordinary, a calm strength. A force of will that made even centuries of imperial authority feel fragile. The queen studied him for a long moment. Her mind raced. Humans were known for courage, but this was something else. Not bravery born from desperation, but certainty, discipline, and control. The kind of power she had never expected from such a small, fragile species. "Proceed, human," the queen said finally, her voice a mixture of curiosity, challenge, and something she could not name. "Show me why you dare speak to me." The human nodded slightly, and for the first time, the queen felt the tiniest flicker of doubt. This single being, standing calmly before her, seemed capable of something beyond belief. And somewhere deep inside, she realized that today, nothing would ever be the same again. The suns dipped lower, casting long shadows across the colony. And a human, quiet, unyielding, prepared to reveal a power that would leave the alien queen in awe. The observation deck was tense. Every alien in the room felt it something they could not name, but instinctively feared. The human stood perfectly still, his brown eyes locked on the alien queen. And the silence between them grew heavy, almost unbearable. "You speak of warning me," the queen said finally, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "But you are only one human. One fragile, insignificant life. How could you possibly threaten an empire that spans galaxies?" The human did not flinch. He raised his head, his voice calm yet filled with unwavering strength. "I am not here to threaten. I am here to show you the truth. You rule with fear, but humans are not weak. You underestimate us because you see only our size, not our spirit. The queen's eyes narrowed, suspicion and curiosity mingling. She had encountered countless species that tried to challenge her. All failed. Most fell quickly. Some begged for mercy. But this human, there was a different air about him, something she could not define. I will give you one chance, the queen said, her tone hardening. Prove this. Spirit. Show me why you dare speak against me. The human took a deep breath. Slowly, he lifted his hands. At first, nothing happened. The guards tensed, waiting for a weapon, a trick, or a sudden attack. But there was no weapon. No device. Only him, standing in the middle of the chamber. Then a faint shimmer appeared around his body, like a thin veil of light. It grew steadily, flickering like fire caught in the wind. The air began to hum softly, almost like a heartbeat. The queen stepped back instinctively, sensing a force she could not fully understand. What is this? She whispered, awe creeping into her voice. Her advisor's eyes widened, and they murmured among themselves in alarm. The shimmer expanded, stretching through the room. Lights flickered. The walls hummed with energy. The human's calm gaze never wavered. I am not dangerous unless you force me to be, he said quietly. But I will not allow fear and oppression to continue unchecked. Suddenly, a small table rose from the floor, spinning slowly in midair. The queen's soldiers lunged forward to stop it, but it was as if invisible hands held it suspended. The human's eyes remained steady, his focus absolute. He was not angry, not vengeful. He was simply demonstrating control, a mastery that defied every expectation the aliens had of him. You manipulate energy, one of the queen's advisors said shakily. But humans? We never imagined, the human cut him off. Humans survive by choice. Our strength comes from endurance, from courage, and from unity. We do not need to dominate to be powerful. The queen's mind raced. She had faced tyrants, warriors, and empires that used entire planets as weapons. She had never seen energy bend to a single human's will without machinery or magic. And yet, here he was, showing her that strength could come from spirit alone. That the spinning table rose higher, then split into pieces that floated gracefully around the chamber, moving in perfect synchronization. The queen took a step back, her pride battling a growing awe. This was not destruction, it was beauty, discipline, control beyond anything she had witnessed. Finally, the human lowered his hands. The shimmering energy faded gently, leaving the room still and silent. Not a single alien spoke. Even the queen, who had ruled through fear for centuries, could not find words. She stared at him wide-eyed, trying to process what she had just seen. You, she said at last, her voice trembling slightly. This power, how can it exist in one human? How can you command it with such control? The human smiled faintly, not with arrogance, but with quiet confidence. Power is nothing without purpose. Humans may seem fragile, but our will is unbreakable. Our choices shape the universe, even when we appear small. For the first time, the queen felt something unfamiliar, doubt. Her centuries of control, her fleets, her conquests, they all felt fragile compared to this human, who had not lifted a weapon and yet commanded a force beyond her imagination. The suns outside dipped lower, casting long shadows across the observation deck. The human stood there, ordinary in form but extraordinary in presence, leaving the alien queen with a single thought echoing in her mind. This one human is unlike anything I have ever faced. And I cannot look away. The observation deck shook with tension. The alien queen's eyes were fixed on the human, a mixture of awe and disbelief in her gaze. She had seen fleets destroyed, worlds conquered, and armies crushed. Yet here stood a single human whose power seemed to challenge everything she had believed. The human took a slow step forward, his brown eyes unwavering. The energy around him pulsed faintly, like the heartbeat of a living star. I am not your enemy, he said quietly, but I will not allow harm to come to the innocent. The queen's guards tensed, their multi-limbed forms coiling like spring-loaded weapons. One of them, a veteran warrior of 1,000 campaigns, lunged toward him instinctively. But the human raised a hand. In an instant, the floor beneath the guard seemed to shift, tilting subtly, causing him to stumble without harm. The other guards froze, realizing that this human could control more than they had ever imagined. The queen's voice rang out sharply, demanding obedience. Enough, you will submit or be destroyed. The human shook his head gently. I do not fight to dominate. I fight to protect. If you continue to rule through fear, I will stop you, not to hurt, but to prevent suffering. Suddenly, the floor beneath the queen and her advisors cracked. Lines of golden energy spread across the deck like veins of fire, lifting debris gently into the air. The walls shimmered and bent slightly, as if reality itself were responding to the human's will. Even the queen's aura of authority flickered in the presence of this force. The queen's voice faltered. "Impossible. This is impossible. Humans are weak. They cannot." Her words were cut off as the human raised both hands. Energy shot upward from the floor, forming a dome of glowing light that pulsed rhythmically, like a living heart. Within the dome, objects hovered, spinning and glowing with soft power. The queen watched, mesmerized, as a chair, a table, and even the delicate glass ornaments of her chamber floated without a sound. Moving in perfect harmony, one of her advisors whispered, voice trembling, "I have never seen anything like this. A single human, controlling energy so perfectly." The human's gaze softened, not with anger, but with understanding. "Power is not meant to crush," he said. "It is meant to protect, to create, to inspire. Humans may seem fragile, but our will can move mountains when we choose to act with purpose." The queen's pride battled with awe. She had ruled countless worlds by fear and strength, yet here she was, facing someone who had not commanded armies or wielded weapons, and yet his presence alone bent reality. She took a step back, the smallest flicker of doubt breaking through centuries of certainty. "Show me why this power exists in you," she whispered, almost to herself. The human's eyes glowed brighter. With a slow, deliberate motion, he lifted the largest cargo container from the colony outside and held it suspended effortlessly in midair. It hovered, spinning gracefully, as if obeying a command it could not refuse. Sparks of energy danced along its edges, harmless but dazzling. "Do you see?" he said softly. "Strength is not only in conquest. True power is in control, in restraint, in the courage to act for the greater good." The queen's breath caught. For the first time in her life, she felt the full weight of her own limitations. Her fleets, her armies, her conquests, all were fragile compared to this human who had not struck a single blow but had shown mastery over forces beyond comprehension. She sank slightly to her knees, not in surrender, but in the awe that swept through her entire being. Centuries of pride, arrogance, and fear were suddenly dwarfed by the simple, undeniable truth. Humans were more than fragile creatures, they were beings, capable of unimaginable strength when driven by conviction and purpose. Outside, the twin suns dipped toward the horizon, casting golden light through the observation deck. The human lowered his hands, and the glowing energy dissipated softly, leaving the room calm but forever changed, and the alien queen, once unshakable and untouchable, could only gaze at him in silent awe. Realizing that this single human had already rewritten the rules of power in the galaxy. The chamber trembled as the queen's pride flared into action. For centuries, she had ruled through fear and strength. She had crushed empires, toppled worlds, and bent reality to her will. Yet, before this single human, she felt something unfamiliar: hesitation. Her eyes, once sharp and commanding, now flickered with a mix of doubt and awe. "Enough!" she cried, her voice reverberating like a pulse through the room. Energy radiated from her body, filling the deck with blinding light. Her psychic warriors, floating silently, responded instantly. Each one raised their arms, channeling streams of raw power toward the human. The very air itself twisted, bending under the might of her presence. The human stood motionless, his brown eyes locked on hers, calm and unwavering. "I do not seek to fight," he said quietly, yet his voice carried through the chamber like a shield. "I only seek to stop unnecessary harm. But if you choose to strike, I will respond." With a roar of light, the queen unleashed a wave of energy. The walls of the observation deck warped, and alarms screamed as the floors buckled beneath the psychic force. Her warriors surged forward, a storm of power moving as one, intending to overwhelm him. But the human raised a hand. Slowly at first, and then with growing certainty, the energy surrounding him pulsed and stretched, bending the attacks harmlessly around him. Beams of destructive force curved into spirals, harmlessly dispersing into the chamber. Objects lifted into the air, spinning gently in his aura like planets orbiting a star. The queen's attacks, meant to intimidate and crush, became nothing more than a spectacle, controlled and redirected with effortless precision. The queen stumbled back, feeling the sting of disbelief. Her pride had never been challenged like this. She had faced armies that fought with strategy, technology, and sheer numbers, and yet none had bent their strength so entirely at the mercy of one opponent. Her chest tightened as she realized that this human's power was not just energy or force, it was mastery. A mastery that respected life, that restrained itself, that moved with purpose instead of cruelty. "Impossible," she whispered. Her voice trembled. "This cannot be." The human's gaze softened. "You think power is only measured by fear. But true power is measured by control, by courage, and by the choice to protect rather than destroy. Humans are small, yes, but our spirit can surpass the might of empires when guided by purpose." The Queen's psychic warriors faltered, confused by the human's aura. Even they, trained for centuries in obedience, hesitated. Some whispered among themselves, awe creeping into their voices. One of them muttered, "We've never seen a human contain so much without destruction." The Queen's hands shook slightly. Her pride wrestled with her growing understanding. She had built her empire on fear, yet here was a creature who commanded more authority with calm restraint than she ever had with armies. She realized painfully that centuries of conquest had never truly measured strength. They had measured control over others, not over oneself. She began, her voice faltering as emotion surfaced for the first time in centuries. "I have never witnessed such restraint." The human took a step forward. "I do not seek to conquer. I do not seek to destroy. But I will stop you if your empire brings suffering. And I will show the galaxy what humans are capable of when our will is strong and our hearts are unbroken." The chamber grew silent, the only sound the quiet hum of energy fading into calm. The Queen, regal yet humbled, sank slightly to her knees. She could not deny it. This human, this small, fragile creature, had withstood her full power without malice, without fear, and without hesitation. She felt awe. She felt fear. And more than anything, she felt the stirring of something she had never imagined. Respect outside. The twin suns cast long shadows across the observation deck. The human stood quietly, energy fading softly around him, his expression calm but resolute. The Queen, once untouchable and absolute, could only watch and marvel. She knew the galaxy had changed in a single instant, and that the human standing before her had begun a transformation she could never have anticipated. The observation deck was quiet now, the tension replaced by an almost sacred stillness. The Queen sat slightly hunched, her long limbs folded, her emerald eyes wide with disbelief. She had ruled for centuries, commanding entire fleets, subjugating worlds, and enforcing loyalty with fear. Yet none of her victories had ever felt so hollow. One human had stood against her, and without even raising a weapon, he had shown a power that left her world trembling. The human moved slowly through the chamber, each step deliberate, each movement calm. He was not threatening, not even in the slightest. He carried no weapons, no technology, no armor, only the quiet, undeniable presence of someone who knew himself, someone who had mastered his own will. You are unlike anything I have ever faced," the Queen said finally, her voice trembling with a mixture of awe and confusion. "I have conquered armies, broken planets, and bent nations to my will. Yet you stand before me, and I feel powerless." The human knelt slightly, not in submission, but in humility. "Power is not measured by fear," he said softly. "It is measured by what we protect, by the lives we choose to value, by the courage to act with purpose. Humans may appear small, but our hearts and our will can move the universe when we choose to rise." The Queen's mind raced. She had been trained to conquer, to dominate, to strike fear into those weaker than her. She had never thought about restraint, about compassion, about power guided by purpose. Her advisors, still hovering uneasily around the room, whispered among themselves. Even they had never seen anything like this. The human raised his hands slowly. From the floor, objects began to float: tools, furniture, small machinery lifting gently into the air, spinning gracefully without breaking or colliding. The display was subtle, almost artistic, yet the power behind it was undeniable. The Queen felt her heart race. She had expected destruction, chaos, or force, but he had shown control. He could have destroyed everything in this chamber in an instant. Yet he did not. "You wield unimaginable power," she said, voice soft, almost reverent. "And yet, you do not use it to harm. Why?" "Because power without purpose is meaningless," the human replied. "To dominate, to destroy, to instill fear, that is weakness disguised as strength. True strength is knowing the limits of your own power and choosing to use it to protect rather than to conquer." The Queen sank further onto her knees, her chest heavy with emotion. Pride, awe, fear, and admiration swirled inside her, a storm she could not tame. She realized something. Oh, found. For centuries, she had measured her empire by fear and obedience. Yet here was a single human, ordinary in form, extraordinary in spirit, who had achieved mastery without armies, without weapons, without conquest. Could it be? She whispered, tears forming in her glowing eyes. Could humans truly be the strongest beings in the galaxy, not by force, but by will? The human knelt opposite her, calm and gentle. We are not the strongest because we fight or conquer, he said softly. We are strong because we endure. We rise when others fall. We protect when others destroy. And we choose courage even when it seems impossible. That is the human way. The Queen's mind was flooded with emotion. Centuries of arrogance and certainty were washed away by the simple truth in his words. She felt the weight of her own actions, the lives ruled through fear, the worlds conquered without compassion. And she felt hope that her empire could change. Hope that the universe could witness something greater than conquest. Outside, the twin suns dipped lower, casting long golden rays through the observation deck. The human lowered his hands, the floating objects settling gently. The chamber was quiet, but the silence carried weight of understanding, of realization, of transformation that the Queen's voice broke, filled with awe and newfound respect. I have never imagined that a human could stand before me and not only survive, but teach me what true strength means. The human smiled faintly, not with pride, but with compassion. You are learning. That is all anyone can ask. For the first time in centuries, the Queen saw beyond fear and power. She saw hope. And she knew that everything about her empire and the galaxy would never be the same again. Days passed in the alien palace, but the air still hummed with the memory of the human's power. The Queen moved quietly through the corridors, her thoughts heavy yet enlightened. Her advisors, once rigid and commanding, now watched her closely, sensing a change in their ruler. Something in the human's presence had shifted the foundation of her beliefs, shaking centuries of tradition and pride. The human did not demand attention. He walked among the palace halls, observing, listening, and teaching through small words and quiet actions. The guards who had once trembled at the Queen's command now noticed the patience and calm in the human's movements. There was no arrogance, no desire to dominate. He acted with purpose, guiding rather than forcing. The Queen had always prided herself on her unmatched strength, her ability to control entire worlds with strategy and fear. But now she understood a new kind of power, the power to inspire, to protect, and to choose restraint even when all seemed lost. She found herself questioning the foundations of her empire. Could she rule through fear forever? Or could she learn to rule through respect, understanding, and trust? One evening, she approached the human quietly. He was seated on the edge of a balcony, watching the twin suns set, their lights spilling over the city below. Tell me, she asked softly, her voice almost hesitant, how do you bear such responsibility without faltering? The human looked at her, his eyes calm and gentle. Responsibility is not something to fear, he said. It is something to accept. We act not for power over others, but for the good of many. Strength is not in conquest, but in understanding and protecting. That is why humans endure. The Queen bowed her head, overwhelmed by the simplicity and truth of his words. For the first time, she felt humility, not weakness but clarity. She realized that her centuries of ruling through fear had been a shield, a way to survive in a galaxy that respected strength above all else. Yet now she saw a path beyond fear, a path toward trust, cooperation, and hope. Over the following days, she began to act differently. Orders were given, not as commands but as guidance. Soldiers were trained to protect rather than intimidate. Colonies once oppressed by fear were offered support and resources, encouraged to grow rather than comply out of terror. And everywhere, the human walked beside her, quietly showing the value of patience, restraint, and courage. The Queen often watched him in silence, amazed by how naturally he inspired those around him. Humans, she realized, did not need to dominate to leave a mark on the galaxy. They simply needed to act with purpose and conviction. Even the guards who had once feared their ruler now respected her more deeply, seeing her willingness to learn and change as a true sign of strength. One night, standing on the palace balcony, the Queen finally spoke her thoughts aloud. I have ruled for centuries, believing strength meant fear, she said softly, almost to herself. But I have learned. True strength comes from wisdom, restraint, and compassion. This human has shown me a way I never imagined. The human smiled faintly, a quiet, reassuring presence. It is not about me, he said. It is about what humans and all beings can achieve when they choose courage over fear, action over inaction. You are learning. That is what matters. The queen felt a warmth she had not felt in centuries, a sense of hope, not just for her empire, but for herself. The galaxy, once a place of control and conquest, could now be a place of growth and understanding. And it began with a single human, small in size but immense in spirit, who had reminded her that power was not always measured by destruction, but by what one chose to protect. The twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the palace. The human stood beside her quietly, his presence calm but undeniable. And for the first time, the alien queen felt truly inspired, knowing that the galaxy could change, not by fear, but by courage and purpose. Years passed, yet the memory of that single human lingered in every corner of the queen's mind. The empire she had ruled through fear for centuries had changed, slowly and surely, into something greater. Colonies once trembling beneath her control now thrived, cities rebuilt with care, and planets prospered under guidance rather than oppression. And the queen, once untouchable and feared, had changed more than any world. She had learned the meaning of true power. The human had returned to his own planet, leaving only stories and the faint memory of his presence. But his impact remained. Soldiers who had once obeyed only commands now thought before acting, seeking understanding before striking. Advisors who had whispered only flattery now spoke honestly, sharing wisdom without fear. And the queen herself ruled with strength that inspired, not intimidated. She had learned restraint, compassion, and courage, and it all began with the human who had shown her what she could not have imagined. She walked through the palace gardens, one quiet morning, the twin suns casting soft golden light over blooming plants and flowing water. Statues of past victories and conquests stood in shadow, reminders of a life built on fear. But she no longer felt pride in them. Now she felt purpose. She knew that strength was not in destruction, but in protection, guidance, and understanding. A young alien approached her, eyes wide with curiosity and respect. "Your Majesty," he said, voice trembling slightly, "the humans. They are remarkable. Do you think, could they truly change the galaxy?" The queen looked at him, her eyes calm yet fierce, her voice carrying warmth she had never known. "Not just humans," she said softly. "Any being who chooses courage over fear, purpose over selfishness, can change the galaxy. But one human showed us the way. One human reminded me that true power is not in ruling, but in protecting what matters." The young alien nodded, inspired by her words, and ran to share the message with others. The queen smiled quietly, thinking of the human who had started it all, the one who had revealed strength beyond belief without a weapon, without a fleet, without conquest. She had seen his courage, his restraint, his will, and it had changed her. It had changed everything. That evening, the queen stood atop the palace balcony, gazing at the stars that stretched endlessly across the galaxy. The memory of the human came to her vividly, his calm presence, his glowing eyes, the way he had lifted objects, moved energy, and bent reality without harm, teaching that restraint was mightier than fear. Her heart swelled with awe, gratitude, and hope. "Humans," she whispered, almost to herself, "you are small, yet you carry a universe within you. You remind us all that courage is not measured by armies, but by spirit. You are extraordinary." Across the galaxy, colonies once oppressed now celebrated life, growth, and creativity. Children looked to the stars with wonder, imagining a future where even the smallest being could achieve greatness. Entire worlds changed their ways, inspired by stories of a human whose power was beyond belief. And in every corner, the lesson echoed: restraint, courage, and purpose could achieve what fear and conquest never could. The queen closed her eyes, feeling the wind on her face, the warmth of the suns, and the quiet hum of life around her. She understood now that power was not a weapon, it was a choice. And the human had shown her the highest form of that choice: the courage to stand, the wisdom to control, and the heart to protect. The galaxy would never forget him. He was gone, yet his presence remained in every heart that chose hope over fear, courage over destruction, and purpose over domination. And the alien queen, once invincible and feared, now ruled with admiration and awe for what one human could teach an entire empire. In that moment, she finally smiled, not as a ruler, not as a conqueror, but as someone transformed. The human's legacy had become her own, and the galaxy itself seemed brighter, stronger, and filled with hope. A single human had changed everything.